We have developed speed, but we have shut ourselves in. Machinery that gives abundance has left us in want. We think too much and feel too little. More than machinery, we need humanity.
We know the air is unfit to breathe and our food is unfit to eat. As if that's the way it's supposed to be. We know things are bad, worse than bad. They're crazy.
Silence! The great and powerful Oz knows why you have come.
You've got to say, I'm a human being. God damn it. My life has value. You have meddled with the primal forces of nature.
Don't give yourselves to brutes, men who despise you, enslave you, who regiment your lives, tell you what to do, what to think, or what to feel, who drill you, diet you, treat you like cattle, use you as cannon fodder. Don't give yourselves to these unnatural men with machine minds and machine hearts.
Jason Bermas.
And who loves you? And who do you love?
Hey everybody, Jason Bermas here, and I'm just asking questions. And the question I'm asking today is, how far has MK Ultra, government corruption, etc., pierced popular culture when a recent Call of Duty game's main line is not only questioning the black operations of the U.S. military, full spoilers ahead, this is on COD, Black Ops Cold War, and really a main thread that comes through at the end of the game that gives you several different endings, none of which really portray the United States in the best light, and we'll get to that in a moment. Are full MK Ultra. In fact, we're going to play you essentially the MK Ultra level where this person starts waking up to the fact that their entire mind has been erased and they've been created as a pseudo asset who, has all these false memories implanted. Now, before we get to all that, we're also going to take a look at the history of quote-unquote mind control, brainwashing, where that terminology actually comes from. We're also going to look a little bit back in history at Call of Duty, because I know they've touched on MK Ultra in Black Ops before. They also have the I think it's 2009 game, No Russian, where they kill civilians in a false flag attack. We're going to talk about that. But really, before I get into any of that, basically, usually I'm not a Call of Duty guy, right? I just want to say this. I don't play multiplayer. I don't have the headset on. I'm not in like a room. Just lately, movies and television shows have just not been great, right? And when I'm trying to unwind at the end of the night, I'm not a huge gamer, but at the same time, I like a good action story, and action movies kind of suck these days as well. They're not the best. So, the Call of Duty campaigns at this point are like 5 or 6 hours. For me, that means I can get through them in a couple weeks. And one of the reasons I also did the video outside of the MK Ultra thing is the last Call of Duty that I played, because I'll be honest, with the first-person shooter thing, I usually like total fantasy. Something like Doom or Borderlands, or what I was introduced all the way back with Wolfenstein, historically, World War II kind of stuff, getting the bad Nazis. So I played COD World War II, and I beat that. And that has just kind of like a run-of-the-mill, down the line, official narrative story of World War II through the whole thing. Nazis bad. The Jewish U.S. soldier, kind of humanizes the German side a little bit, but then is also kind of the main driving point of the storyline, being taken by the Nazis, and by the end of the game, your real mission is to rescue them, right? That's the big thing. So I guess I was kind of taken aback. I chose Call of Duty Black Ops Cold War because, again, it was in that time period that it wasn't so modern. I'm going to play, people are telling me to play Black Ops 2 because that takes place in 2025 and it came out like a decade plus before. Might play that one. But I wanted to see the take. And, they got Reagan in it. It gets into the, Cuban era, Vietnam. It spans a good amount of years, right? And it does it very clever. And honestly, it's a fun storyline. I totally and completely recommend it. Even if you watch this, you can play through it. There are, multiple endings. There's a little, you can play with the dialogue a bit, but it's pretty good, mindless, almost like Jerry Bruckheimer fun. And that's why, even though the threat is there on the idea of mind control, occasionally you'll see a document out there, etc., I was really surprised how deep they went with it, and again, how dirty they made the United States look in that. So, in a moment, we're going to look at the original Manchurian Candidate. We're going to look at some other Call of Duty stuff. We're going to get into the term brainwashing and mind control and how it was originally really associated with the communists on a high level in the United States. Okay, and that's something that most people don't understand either. Before we get there, I do want to remind you, I need your support. Thumbs it up, subscribe, and share, everybody. Please consider donating via the Buy Me a Coffee or other links down below. Please check out the documentary films. Thumbs it up, subscribe, share, and of course, check out the other links and platforms below. So, the Manchurian Candidate, there's a lot of misinformation, disinformation when we're talking about the distribution of this film, why it was pulled from the United States in most cases over the years. But the reality of this movie right here, which I absolutely 1,000% recommend you go watch. Awesome movie. Holds up to this day. I probably haven't watched the thing in about, 5-10 years, but it's excellent. It's just like a lot of people can't get down with the older black and white films. This, Doctor Strangelove, classics that have a real message. And in this film, in the very beginning, it's all communism, okay? And it's the illustration of using mind control via communism and a demonstration of this mind control in front of, I guess you would say, their oligarchs, their military-industrial complex, etc. Right? Now, number one, what that did cause, let's see right here, is that it was actually banned in communist countries in Eastern Europe and the former Soviet Union due to its political nature until the early 1990s. Now, we're going to get into the remake as well because that really brings it full circle from a communist mind control program into the United States use of mind control, modernizing that story and taking us into the Iraq War. All right? The first Gulf War. I think it came out in 2004. So it goes back to that time period. And look, 2004, when this comes out, when this film's in production or being talked about, really, you're talking about that post 9/11 era. Very dangerous film to come out again because, again, it's not focused on the communists, like the original. All right? Now, what I want to say about this is one of those, here, let's go right here. One of those aspects of mind control and where the term brainwashing comes from, kudos to Annie Jacobson. What you're looking at here is pages from her book, DARPA, the Pentagon's Brain. Okay, and this is history that I didn't know, that I wasn't taught, that I find extremely fascinating in the arena of mind control. Let's read it right here. On February 23rd, 1953, a U.S. Marine colonel named Frank S. Schwabel, appeared on TV as a prisoner of war of the North Koreans. Schwabel, a member of the U.S. 1st Marine Air Wing, had been shot down on a combat mission over North Korea 7 months earlier in July of 1952. In a 6,000-word statement broadcast on Chinese radio, Colonel Schwabel shocked the world with startling confessions. Colonel Schwabel said that he had been given detailed orders by his superior officers to participate in various elements of bacteriological warfare. Schwabel cited specific field tests, which he claimed had already taken place, and said the military commanders had discussed with him their plans for using biological weapons against North Korean civilians in regular combat operations. Schwabel named names, described meetings, and discussed strategy. Everything Schwabel said, if true, violated the Geneva Conventions. Now, you got to ask yourself before I go on, whether all this is real or the explanation that they give later is real and propaganda. Because, again, we know bioweapons programs existed during World War II. This is post-World War II. We know that we adopted covertly Nazis into our intel, space, and warfare programs. We know the Japanese were running biological operations in World War II, etc. Now, I would love to get my hands on this audio. I'm going to maybe seek it out. If we can find it or anybody in the audience has it, DM me a link. We're going to check it out. General Mark W. Clark, UN Supreme Commander in Korea, immediately denounced the germ warfare charges, declaring them fabrications. But at the Pentagon, officials were aware how quickly such a narrative could spin out of control. At the Pentagon, the man tasked with handling the situation was William Godel, now Deputy Director of the Psychological Strategy Board. The PSB coordinated psychological warfare operations between the Department of Defense and the CIA. In response to Colonel Schwabel's affair, Godel convened an emergency meeting of the PSB. This was psychological warfare of the worst order, Godel declared. Declassified minutes of the emergency PSB meeting indicate that the members agreed. The position of the United States government was then, and is now, that it never engaged in biological warfare in Korea. So how should the United States respond? Secretary of Defense Charles Wilson suggested an all-out campaign to smear the Koreans. He wanted the Pentagon to excuse the communists of a new form of war crime and a new form of refinement in atrocity techniques, namely mind murder or menticide. It's the first time that I ever heard the term menticide, and this is the first time that I really got any insight to how brainwashing becomes part of the vernacular. The CIA thought that was a bad idea. Menticide was too powerful a word. Director Dulles cautioned, and it was concerned too much power. It conceded too much power to the communists. But time was crucial, and the Pentagon had to respond. The members of the PSB agreed to a watered-down version of the Secretary Wilson's suggestion. Hours later, the Department of Defense issued a statement calling Colonel Schwab's action the result of a mind-annihilating method of these communists in extorting whatever words they want. Defense Department officials had a very specific name for what the communists were doing to our soldiers, a word recommended by the CIA. The communists were brainwashing American soldiers, the Pentagon said. It was a CIA move that was 3 years in the making. In fact, the word brainwashing had entered the English lexicon in September of 1950, courtesy of the CIA, when an article by a reporter named Edward Hunter appeared in the Miami newspaper. The news, brainwashing taxes force Chinese into ranks of Communist Party, the headliner read. Although Hunter had been a journalist for decades, he also worked for the CIA. See that? All the way back in 1950, the Central Intelligence Agency, out of its inception, was part of shaping the narrative, controlling the media. All right? Let's continue. This is the kind of stuff that you should actually be learning in history class or in any of these academic schools, right? This is a big deal. Let's see. He'd been hired by the agency on a contract basis to disseminate brainwashing stories through the mainstream press. Brainwashing, wrote Hunter, was a devious new tool used by the communists to strip a man of his humanity and turn him into a robot or a slave. The very concept grabbed Americans by the throat. The notion of a government mind control program had been a mainstay of dystopian science fiction novels for decades. From Jürgen Zemiton's 1921 classic, We, to Aldous Huxley's 1932 bestseller, Brave New World. But that was science fiction. This was real, Hunter wrote. So you could continue and read more of this. Again, this guy said he was brainwashed, denounced everything, and that's where you get the modern day terminology and the move, I guess, to put out something like the Manchurian Candidate a decade plus later. Now, the reason the United States didn't really have it out there because, again, you look at this, and it actually did air, I believe, once in 1965 on television and also in 74, but in large part it was taken off because Frank Sinatra didn't want it out there via the Kennedy assassination and what people were talking about and thinking about there. So that's another really interesting aspect of all of this, right? So the Manchurian Candidate, really quickly, when it was modernized with Denzel Washington and Liev Schreiber, goes even further into the political arena where in the original, it's all communist-based. And again, full spoilers on everything I'm talking about. In the newer one, it's this driving political force in the United States that's not really communist. It has all these handlers, and the mother of Liev Schreiber, who's the main mind control victim, is not only in on it, pushing it through to try to make him the president of the United States. Okay? And it plays on the original in this firefight scenario, and then you find out what's really happening as everything devolves with this unit that was part of a mind control project and, of course, didn't know it. And it gets even darker than you could ever imagine. Both those. Totally recommend them, okay? Now, before we get into the mind control chapter of Cold War, and again, full spoilers, where they're really getting into it, I do want to say this about Call of Duty. One of the other big things, number one, there's 4 of these bad boys right now? Yeah, 24 of these. All right, so it's not, game's been around a lot. It's released like at least annually, if not more. And it had a very controversial mission that I actually covered all the way back, I think, in 2009 when it came out when I was working for InfoWars. And it's called the No Russian one, right? And a lot of people call it the most memorable mission. You can choose not to fire. You can actually, I think, choose to skip this mission. But essentially what happens, and we're not going to play this one here, is that you are a covert CIA agent inside of a Russian cell, terrorist cell, and they go in and they just start slaughtering civilians in an airport. Now, at the very end, your character, whether you partook or not and shot these civilians, right, you get iced on the scene because he knew you, the lead guy knew that you were a CIA agent. So it's your body that gets left there. So the evidence is it's actually the United States, but the Russians are pulling the evil false flag and killing civilians to go to war and declare war on the United States, right? So it's had these false flag elements, but just like what you just saw, pointed at the communists. But now we're at a point where, again, the United States is not painted in a great light in Cold War. And all three endings are like kind of dark. Again, spoiler alerts, after this mission that we're going to show, you get a choice on whether you give up the Russians that you find out that actually were your allies and you were working with, and then sabotage the team by calling something in. You can lie and not sabotage the team, or you can flip on the Russians even though you've been tortured and mind controlled, right? And like the theme of the story is like multiple nukes, even though they're US nukes, by the way, are going to go off in Europe if you don't flip on the Russians. So even at the end, after like I was tortured and all this other stuff, and I don't believe in these paradigms and Johnny nonsense, et cetera, right? I still gave up the Russians. And I'm like, I don't want nuclear war. I'm still an American, right? So what do you get for stopping the nuclear attack, doing all, I did the extra missions and, outed more of the Russian moles within the intelligence. What you get? You get a bullet to the dome, just like in the false flag mission. Your last mission is just to get iced out by the CIA. I mean, seriously. Now, that's the canon. That's the good ending. The other two are if you tell them the wrong thing and you don't call it in, you get shot again. And the only way you survive is if you stay loyal to the Russians, you call it in, and then you murder everybody in the CIA. So it's kind of a dark themed game altogether. But I do think it's one worth playing. Without further ado, I give you the MK Ultra mission. I think it's called Identity Crisis via Black Ops Cold War.
Over here! We've got a live one!
We tried everything. Normal forms of interrogation weren't working.
Subjects will erase their minds difficult and painful process.
That's a small price to pay.
The CIA's mind control program has had a great deal of success with implanted memories.
You want me to tell them about my time in Vietnam?
Lastly, you'll need a command phrase to trigger the implanted memories.
We have a job to do. We've got a job to do. We've known each other for years. We fought together, learned together, been through the whole Vietnam together. We've got a job to do.
And now the training's complete. You just need to give the subject a name.
Bell.
So let's see, I'm not sure if it goes further than that. Like the other one, I mean, they're torturing him. Like, let's see. I think this is actually where they're asking him questions and he figures it out. Yeah, so you're right here. So you're on the gurney, the whole nine, and this is where you kind of like you figure out, who am I? Let's see. I must have muted that one right there. Let's bring it back up.
Perseus say. Where is he?
Who am I?
You're disoriented, Bell. We'll explain everything later. Right now, we need to help each other. We gave you a second chance when you were shit out of luck. Now, we just want some assistance in return.
Bell, you were one of Perseus's agents. His associate, Arash Kardavar, turned on you at the airstrip in Turkey. Left you for dead.
So this is a major spoiler. Like, this is like the opening scene of the game. You find out, basically, one of the other Russian agents tried to have you killed, etc. But, you know, when you look, like, that was mild. In the previous mission, they're injecting you with stuff. You're walking through this imagination land conflict that absolutely never happened to kind of bring you through doors. So, you know, that's the reveal that you were part of this program. The previous mission is even trippier than that. Folks, I hope you enjoyed this program where we went from the Manchurian Candidate to modern day Call of Duty games and the origins of brainwashing. I cannot recommend DARPA, the Pentagon's Brain, more. What a great book. You can also get it as an audio book. I do want to remind everybody to please thumbs it up, subscribe, share. Please go give me a follow at X. We have lost 50 or so subscribers in the last 2 to 3 weeks on YouTube. YouTube is not a platform where I can even gain any traction. None of those platforms are ones where I can be monetized, unfortunately. So also consider using the links down below and buying me a coffee. $5, $10, $15. It absolutely means the world to me. Big donors. I do want to thank you as well for keeping me afloat. Remember, folks, to me, it's not about left or right. It is always about right and wrong. I absolutely love you guys, and we'll see you on the flip side.